I've spent my entire professional career producing hunting content behind the lens and behind the computer. I now have 2 young boys, and I want to pass the hunting tradition along to them. This is my quest for my first buck ever.
Are you kidding?
We actually produced a film called Adam that you can check out on the Deer Society YouTube page. It's pretty special to me. I poured my heart and soul into it, and definitely recommend watching it. And that film tells the story of my journey up until this point. But in this hunt breakdown, we're going to dive into the details and the strategy and everything that it took to get my first buck. So I grew up with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, and I've had that all my life. That's all I've known. It's affected my mobility as I've gotten older, so drawing a bow wasn't realistic for me. I've tried, it just wasn't working. So we decided to go the crossbow route, and crossbows are a great option for hunters out there, and I was excited to take mine out in the field. So we're hunting here in Minnesota. Fall is a really busy time for us, so the preparation part is key. So we like to plan our strategy early, get everything in place while we can in the summertime, and really take advantage of that during the fall when we've got those windows to hunt. The property we're hunting at, it's very familiar to us. My buddy, business partner, Brian, has had lots of success on this property, and I'm really excited to be a part of the whole process, getting everything in place for this year. One of the main focus areas of this property was a spot where we were going to implement an illusion food plot system. So this particular plot, it's about an acre, maybe a little more, and we decided to put in some illusion prime time, some easy greens, a little bit of rye, and gave these deer lots of different options for that season. So now the way this plot's set up, it's between 2 big agricultural fields, it's secluded, and we've got some bulletproof access. The way we hunt this plot is a ground blind on the north edge of the field. So the great thing about this is any south wind that we get, we can slip in along the backside, get right in there without ever being detected by these deer. So that summer, as we're prepping, getting ready for the season, shooting the crossbow a lot, trying to get comfortable with that. Shooting my first deer, I'm a little timid, not quite sure what to expect when I actually go out there and sit behind the weapon. I'm so used to sitting behind the computer or behind the camera. Producing content, I've seen so many reactions that, quite honestly, I wasn't sure how I was gonna feel if I had the opportunity to shoot a deer. But I'm one that kind of over-prepares. I like to make sure I get all my ducks in a row, really shoot that crossbow a lot, getting a feel for it. One of the big things was range finding, getting used to range finding, getting the right range, getting dialed in on the scope, those kinds of things, just kind of getting those things tweaked out before I get out there, just so I could really feel comfortable. So the whole summer prep side of it was new to me as well, for the most part. Getting out there in the field, planting seed for the first time in a food plot situation, setting up trail cameras in the areas that I was going to hunt, and just seeing that as the months progressed in the summer, seeing those steps pay off. Getting into the office, looking through trail camera pictures with Brian was one of the highlights of my day every day. Seeing what was showing up, looking at the velvet pictures, kind of taking an inventory of those bucks. And Brian helping me with different strategy here and there and why we're doing this particular thing, why we're doing that particular thing. It was a great learning experience. And these were the experiences that I was looking for.
I'm excited to introduce a brand new Deer Society video series called The Art of Deer Hunting. Now within this series, we have categories such as the art of calling, the art of food plots, the art of scent control. We're gonna detail and break down all things in these categories plus more, from trail cameras, stands, scrapes, all things related to successful deer hunting is what this series is all about. This series is a culmination of all the information we've received internally from some of the best deer hunters across the country and the methods they've used to successfully harvest mature whitetails year after year. This is called The Art of Deer Hunting on the Deer Society YouTube channel.
So with this particular spot, we're hunting in a ground blind, and one of the key elements to this is putting a screen where that blind is. So this particular setup allowed us to slip in along the backside, get up into the blind, and use that screen so the deer that were in the plot or even back in the woods couldn't see us coming in. The other crucial thing about this is at the end of the night, when we had to slip out, this would allow us to stay undetected and get out of there nice and quiet without the deer seeing us. So we've got the food plot planted, we've got the trail cam set up, getting our inventory for the season, seeing what's out there, and now it's just a matter of really finding that right window to hunt. It's now the middle part of November, and we're going out for my first ever hunt. The weather was perfect. We had snow falling, cold temps. You couldn't ask for a more picturesque first hunt. So being mid-November, we're not peak rut anymore. It's kind of more towards the tail end of that rut. But bucks, they're still chasing. They're still running around with the does. And being in the blind that first night, we saw some activity. Not long after we got in there, the deer started piling out into the food plot, and they were hammering that prime time. So we had a bunch of does in the plot. I look up, here comes a buck. Now for my first buck, it looked pretty good. Like my heart started pumping. He started trotting in, chasing after those does a little bit. He stopped to grab a bite to eat, but the main reason he was there was for those does. We heard him grunt, chasing a little bit. It was pretty cool to see. I see this kind of action all the time on the computer screen, but to be there in person, behind the weapon, experiencing it for myself, was pretty exciting. This first hunt was unbelievable, lots of activity. We had a few days here to hunt. The weather was mint, so we were gonna take advantage of all the deer activity on this food plot. So the next day, our second day, we get in there. We went in a little earlier that day, probably around noon. We got in there perfect, quiet, clean. We're getting set up, getting the camera gear set up, getting the 10-point set up. And I just happened to look up and I see this big-bodied buck walking along the edge there. Caught us both off guard. We were able to get some really cool footage of him just walking along the edge there. And seeing that buck in person, like you could just tell his body size, just the way he carried himself, the way he walked. He was a big buck. And it got me excited. He didn't stay there very long. He kind of walked along the edge. I ranged him. He was about 105 yards, too far for a crossbow at that point. We'd been seeing some good bucks the night before, but seeing this one raised that bar, and it was just a whole nother level of excitement. And, kind of one of the crazy things about this is it's noon. He's on his feet, he's looking, he's searching for does. Kind of unexpected at that time of day. He comes into that food plot looking for does. None in there at this point. Turns around, back on the search. So as the days continue to pass, we continue hunting at this particular spot because our access and our setup is so bulletproof. We saw several really nice bucks in this plot. One in particular that came out, he's a little young. He was a 3-year-old, double throat patch. Pretty buck, beautiful buck. But in the back of my mind, I kept thinking about that other mature buck that we had seen on the hunt before, and I just thought he was a little young still, so we decided to give him the pass just because we had been seeing so much activity, and we knew that there were several other mature bucks in this property. But one thing about this buck that really kind of stuck out was unique was that double throat patch, and that characteristic will allow us to keep track of him in the coming years. So our window that we had to hunt there in mid to late November is now over, and we're in the late season now. It's December. The temperatures have really dropped. They are sub-zero, bitter cold. And we have this other spot that we have an opportunity to hunt. It's kind of more in the heart of the property. And this particular spot had standing beans. And here in the upper Midwest, snow, cold temps, these bucks are gonna go to those beans. Now what's kind of cool about this spot is we had the farmer leave one hedgerow of beans along the edge of the woods. And this time of year, we're getting north-northwest winds the majority of the time. So the only way to really access this spot was from the south, which was about a mile walk from our road access there. Now, once you get into this spot, the only effective way to hunt here is position a blind south of those beans. And this blind would be in the wide open. This blind is out in the middle of nowhere. We're approaching the end of the season, so we're just gonna throw a Hail Mary out there and see what happens. So we set up this blind a few days before the day we were gonna go in to hunt. And at the same time we set the blind up, we put a reveal camera out there just to see what kind of activity we would get. And sure enough, that same night, the deer were out in front of that camera eating those beans. They didn't have a care in the world. So just a couple days later, I had a lot of confidence in going in and hunting this spot. So the day we go in to hunt, it was extremely cold, sub-zero. This was gonna be the ticket to seeing some activity. So we get set up in the blind. Maybe 10 minutes later, deer started filtering out, feeding in those beans. And maybe 5 minutes after that, here comes just a giant walking out of the timber.
Good buck coming right here. Walking to the left.
So this is a deer that we know all too well. It's Sticker 10. He's a 4-year-old. He made a giant leap from 3 to 4. And we all, as a group, sat down together at the beginning of the year. We knew that this deer was going to be something special, and we wanted to see him make it to 5 years old at least. So we decided to give him the pass that day. I don't want to say it was hard to do. I mean, I just knew in my mind, like, if he did show up, I wasn't going to shoot him. So it wasn't really that hard. But seeing him in person was something special. It was cool to watch him feed out there for several minutes, giving us several good looks. Just impressive deer. What an incredible way to cap off the season. Really, every sit that we had was exciting, lots of activity, and I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. So now going into my second season, there were quite a few things that we've learned from our first season of that particular spot that we sat a majority of that time over that food plot. One thing we noticed was the deer were not coming as close as we would like to the blind for a comfortable shot. They were staying at the back of the food plot, kind of hovering around that 90 to 100 yard range. And we decided to implement a new food plot strategy this year to try and draw those deer in closer to the blind. We're gonna leave the blind where it was. We're gonna keep the screen. That'll give us that great access that we had the previous year. And what we're gonna do different this year is we're gonna split the plot down the middle with another screen. Now what this is gonna allow us to do is have those deer, as they're transitioning from one plot to the other, the thought is they're gonna have to walk along that screen in front of it to get in that more comfortable shooting range. So we planted primetime, 4 seasons, easy greens in this plot, kind of a mixture of everything. And we're hoping that these little tweaks would put the odds in our favor this season. And what's interesting about this is the previous year we were in a drought year, and this year it's even worse. We're in extreme drought levels. We've hardly got any rain this year. We've got a lot into this strategy. Kind of worried about it, but Mother Nature's in control. What can you do? So the trail cameras are out, season's coming. We know there's some great deer around. We went out to check on the food plot, see how it's doing, and it was incredible. We could not believe how this food plot looked. We have had no rain, and to walk up on this food plot and to see how it looked was incredible. It was lush. Brian and I couldn't believe it. He said it was one of the best food plots he's ever seen. And for it to be in a drought year, pretty amazing. And at this point, seeing that food plot, I'm fired up. I'm ready to go, ready to get out there. And we were gonna go in earlier this year. We were gonna try to hit that late September window, early October window, and it was time to hunt. So it's September 30th. It's our first hunt, first night out for this season, in the same ground blind as we were the previous year. And we had, again, lots of activity. Deer coming in, deer feeding. And there's just something special about being on the ground instead of elevated in a tree. You get that ground level experience, seeing those deer eating the food. You can hear all the sounds, hear them chomping away. Just really gives you that up close and personal experience. So we had lots of activity that night. No shooter bucks came in. So fast forward to October 5th, we're in there for our second sit. So for this hunt, the wind was strong, it was swirling. But like previous sits, the deer filtered out to the food plot, eating, but you could tell with that wind, that strong wind, they were on edge, which in turn kind of put me on edge a little bit, to be honest. And as the sun went down, the wind started to lay down as well. And sure enough, at the back of the food plot, here comes 3 bucks walking right at us. And as those 3 bucks were walking in, that front one looked really good, and I knew that this was one I wanted to shoot. So as this buck is feeding out in the food plot and coming a little closer, I got a better look at him. Sure enough, it's the double throat patch buck that we saw the previous year. So he was feeding in the back of the food plot, kind of at that 90-yard range, and he fed there for a little bit, and I started to wonder, like, are we even gonna get a shot at this buck? Is he gonna come close enough? And sure enough, he just kind of makes a decision, starts to trot right towards us, right into the middle of the food plot, and it was game on. This buck's coming in. I ranged him at 53 yards. He's settled in, he's eating, and this, I'm thinking in my head, this is unbelievable. We saw this buck the previous year at the same exact spot that I passed him. And now I've got the opportunity to shoot him a year later. So at this point, it's getting real. My heart's racing, my mind is racing as well. I settle into the crossbow, looking at him through the scope, and all I'm thinking at this particular time was just calm down, settle your mind, breathe, and just get the crosshair set and be steady.
Did I get him? You just shot your first buck. Oh my God. That's unbelievable. Are you kidding me? There's no way. Wow.
So I've been in this situation numerous times, but it's always been behind the camera, never behind the weapon. I'm used to getting that adrenaline rush, but to be the one pulling the trigger was something entirely different. The excitement, just the overwhelming sense of accomplishment, to see all that hard work, strategy pay off, was a feeling that really I can't describe, to be honest.
Wow. Oh my God. Are you kidding me? Brian. Put this down. Look at this guy. Are you kidding me? He didn't go far at all. My first buck ever. You know, I've been doing outdoor television production for coming up on my 15th year now. I've never done this ever before in the field myself, and I got 2 boys at home, and a couple years ago I decided that I wanted to give it a shot and come out and try to shoot my first buck, and that's the reason I wanted to get started, start a new tradition, get them involved in the outdoors. It just teaches you so many things about life and appreciation. Been hunted hard for the past 2 years, had a lot of great sits. We actually saw this guy last year, late season, eating in the same exact food plot. We got some cool video of him, almost the same spot where I shot him. Gave me a good broadside shot, hit him a little back, but I think I caught that artery there and he didn't go far at all. He just bled and crashed, and thankful for that he didn't suffer at all. And just a gorgeous buck. Double throat patch down there. Just so happy to finally get my first buck and start that new tradition. I'm excited to get my boys out here to see him. They're gonna be pumped. I just wanna thank everybody for helping me out along this journey. Get me started, get me going. Just unbelievable.
You know, I think there were several keys to this hunt. The first, having that passion to go out for the first time, not being afraid to ask for help, relying on those resources that you have to get you started, taking that guidance, learning, implementing those tools along the way, and then really just maintaining that drive, having a good attitude along the way, stay positive, don't get frustrated, and just enjoy the whole process. Key number 2, strategy. Having the right food plot in place, having bulletproof access, just the setup overall, not to mention scent control, is crucial. But really from year 1 to year 2, tweaking those little details, dialing everything in to make that setup even better. And then I'd say key number 3 is being prepared, being over-prepared, endlessly shooting that crossbow, getting comfortable, and as a first-time hunter, just preparing for that moment as best as you can when it comes. Overall, my first buck, incredible experience, couldn't ask for anything better than the way it turned out. To start that new family tradition, pass it on to my boys, starting to get them involved now as well. It's just something special and something I'll remember forever.
Thanks for watching this Deer Society Hunt Breakdown. Subscribe to the channel for more great educational content to help you become a better hunter. From podcasts to the Art of Deer Hunting series, hunt breakdowns, tips, tactics, and a whole lot more. The Deer Society is all about deer hunting education.